Today we have a special guest in studio with us. It's Jon Hart. Jon came from the same church group as Steve and I did, and he was a little bit older, and he is someone who has been a very good friend and someone who encouraged us when we were just up and coming. So I hope you enjoy the show and meeting our buddy, good friend, Jon Hart. Cheers.
And camera 2 is your computer. Okay.
Camera 2 is the screen. Yeah.
Camera 1, camera 2.
Exactly. Camera 1.
I was thinking of this like Wayne's World a little bit. Like this is a public access.
Want to try some Romans?
That's a great segue.
This is an easy one. What?
He said that's a great segue.
Yeah, segues are something that,
We specialize
I
around
accept-
here.
Well,
Yeah,
listen,
we
mall cops
really-
are very good with segues too.
They are.
I'm not a mall cop or anything, but maybe someday.
You do own a scooter, so it's close. All right. Would you like to read this one?
Sure. So today's Romans is Romans 8, 1 through 4. So now there is no condemnation for those who belong to Christ Jesus. And because you belong to him, the power of the life-giving Spirit has freed you from the power of sin that leads to death. The law of Moses was unable to save us because of the weakness of our sinful nature. So God did what the law could not do. He sent his own Son in a body like the bodies we sinners have. And in that body, God declared an end to sin's control over us by giving his Son as a sacrifice for our sins. He did this so that the just requirement of the law would be fully satisfied for us who no longer follow our sinful nature, but instead follow the Spirit.
So last week we were talking about how all of that we're kind of still slaves to sin in some ways, right? And so this is going the opposite direction. This is telling us that we're free from that. The Spirit has freed us from this. So,
I haven't seen the previous episode yet.
So the previous episode.
So were you
was
doing
chapter
Romans
7?
7?
Romans
Yes.
7.
And the things I do not want to do, I do, but I do not do the things that I want to do. That whole like circle of like
Right.
craziness there. Yeah, that's my favorite passage in the whole word.
In 7?
In 7.
Okay.
Well, just because it's Paul who met Jesus and like had apparently more faith than just about anybody ever, besides obviously God who had perfect faith. But and then here he is identifying with the sinful conundrum we find ourselves in. And even though it's kind of funny how it's it kind of circles around, does all that, it so clearly encapsulates that idea of how messed up, how wretched we are. And then he ends it with, what a wretched man I am. Who will save me from this body of death? Thanks be to God and Jesus Christ. And then the next sentence is, so now there is no condemnation because thanks be to God, Jesus Christ.
So this is the thought after what he described was
the power of that first sentence there is based on what he just said, how lost we are because the law condemns us.
Yes.
yeah
Because the law makes clear the difference between sin and non-sin. And then we become so aware of our sin and we can't escape it because the law is perfect and just and we can't do it.
Yeah, we keep on going back to the well, and no matter how hard we try, even though you can actually want to do what's right, and you still can't keep it consistent forever.
Can't do
You
it.
still mess up.
I think a lot of people get disillusioned. You know, I reflect on a thought I had
Okay.
when I was in youth group,
Yeah.
thinking, because, every once in a while we might do like a men's retreat or something like that. And as a youth, you're a part of it. And you're seeing these men who are much older, like 40. And they're talking about
Much older.
Yeah.
We'll
Ancient.
never be that old.
they're talking about where they're at in their spiritual walk. And they're admiring you as a youth, like, wow, I wish I had known this when I was your age, they would say, right? And I remember having this thought of thinking, man, that's true. Then if where I'm at now as a 17-year-old, 18-year-old, whatever, man, what will God be able to do through me when I'm 40?
You're going to be a powerhouse.
like honestly, this is a delusional thought, but I'm thinking I'm going to be like, because I know now this thing that this 40-year-old old person is saying they wish they knew when they were my age, then it can only mean that by the time I'm their age, my faith, my walk, everything's going to be this like earth-shattering, like I'll be able to move mountains kind of thing, right, with my faith. And then I experience Romans 7.
Right.
And everybody does,
Uh-huh.
right? And a lot of people become disillusioned because they think this faith hasn't made my life easy. This faith, this reality, like I said, I left the youth group. And then on the other side of the youth group, things were a lot harder because I wasn't in that bubble of like high school and youth group. It was hard. And I'm like, whoa, wait a second. It's not supposed to be like this.
You lose that constant culture, and you have access to a whole bunch more world.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in high school, you have the total culture, and then also you still live with your parents.
And we didn't really have the internet then or anything.
Yeah, there was no internet.
It was just like going out and living and seeing the world in ways where, you're part of a little bit of a bubble. You don't see it.
Yeah.
Anyway, Romans 7 just reminds me all the time of that there is this like, I ache when I see people who at one point did have that spark of faith in them and you saw it, and then it fades away, and then they seem to just never come back, and I think, Romans 8:1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no condemnation for those who belong to Jesus Christ. So this says that you've been freed from the power of sin that leads to death. What do you think about that?
I mean, I look at the world where there's not a whole, like people who don't have the Holy Spirit, people who aren't saved.
Yep.
And it's an inevitability that they're going to do what they want, how they want, when they want it. And that's going to be a ruling force in their life. And you'll see, like, for me, what I really notice, what's stark to me, is that it doesn't seem to trouble them. Because it's just the way that it is. And so they have a comfort level with, and I think God's word is like the truth is written on our hearts. Like no one's free from being made in the image of God. We're all made in it. So we have these truths that like are embedded in us. So everybody has this like morality, and they don't know where it comes from, but obviously we do. So there are people who will be very ethical, moral people, but at the same time, you don't have to look under the hood very far, where you see they have a real comfort with, if they're going to lie to protect themselves, they'll easily do it. And they don't really have
a conscience,
about it.
Right.
They're not haunted by it, And so the freedom isn't freedom in what I had wished for when I was 18, and that, I wouldn't struggle with sin.
Mm-hmm.
The freedom is you can be aware of it, to know that it is a struggle, and that you can have power over it through the Holy Spirit, which is, gobbledygook to somebody who's not saved, but people who are saved and have experienced that, it's self-evidently true.
Yeah, and it's so good.
The high schooler has an advantage because you can see it now from the person who is 40 talking to the high school kid. What the 40-year-old is trying to communicate, I think, if I was to talk, like when I talk to my high school brother, who's still in high school, it's kind of like, dude, the struggles that you're starting to encounter right now, they're the same struggles that you'll still be dealing with 20 years down the road. Like, it doesn't really change. The thing that is at the essence of what is entices a teenager is still the thing that is enticing a 60-year-old. And it might, the circumstances might change around it. You know, you might be stealing from your company instead of stealing from your parents or your friend or something like that. But what you're encountering as you get into that, you know, that when you start to become an adult is like the devil throws all of it at you. And just because I'm older, the game doesn't change. And so it's kind of like, good, you're so prepared. But what that speech also can kind of do, and it did for me in a lot of ways, is you think because everything that the older people are saying is correct, they've learned it. Like they've put all this stuff in their rear view mirror. And then you start to go, why haven't I put it in my rear view mirror and I'm 24? Why haven't I put it in my rear view mirror and I'm 29? Why haven't I put it, and you go, oh, okay. There's no temptation that is not common to man. And, you know, that's comforting to know that whatever is tempting you is not like unique only to you. But, you know, the converse is also true. Every single man, no matter how good they look or how well they speak, has also encountered and is constantly has to be on guard with the same temptations that's common to everybody.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. You know, one thing married couples learn if you stay married for very long is when you look at people who are married for a very long time, one thing you automatically know is, oh, they've probably thought about divorce at some point. They've probably struggled with extreme frustration or extreme like disappointment.
What
how
did I
things
get myself
came out.
into?
Yeah, like okay, I now understand why people sometimes want to get out, not because you know you want to, or not because you know it's necessarily something you're going to follow through on, but the intensity of the reality of like the disappointment, the hurt, the struggle to you know really come to terms with what it means to give up your own idea for what you want for somebody else, and realize if they don't reciprocate, it doesn't change your responsibility. And that plays so many mind games, but married people get that, you know, when you see somebody who's been married so I think it's the same thing with generally the Christian walk too, is when you see somebody who's still a Christian, still like dug in that they're, you know, no matter how hard life's been or how their struggle has gone, you see years later, they're returning to the word, they're returning to the church, they're doing things to continue to walk with God. You know that they've had the Holy Spirit in them and that they've kept, you know, the power of the Spirit has freed you from the power of sin that leads to death. Like there's evidence of it there. You know, you see it. I just want to say, all right, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but when I see you guys, we're much older than we were when we all met. But I still see you like I saw you all those years ago.
Yeah.
You know,
I know what you mean.
I mean, it's like, it's crazy. I'm sure people from the outside looking in see like older guys if they're young, right? They're like, oh, look at these. I don't know. I'm 44.
40.
41.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Well,
a couple of half dead people. And I still see us as stupid kids with, one thing I remember specifically about you two, I was thinking about this, is the mail Jeeps.
Yes.
That's like a very fond memory, and it's explicitly is the you two.
Yeah.
Because they had that surplus of like decommissioned mail Jeeps that they were selling for like $500, was it?
Yeah, if you got an expensive one, they're $500. If what happened was
you get the one with holes in it for $450.
But I was on my way home from school. I was at U of M Flint, and they had a big post office there in Flint, and they had one mail Jeep out in front of the post office, and it says like $400. And I thought, I
don't want to lose money on this.
I could buy that. And I mean, essentially you have a street legal go-kart for less than the price of a go-kart. And I'm thinking, I'm going to need to look into this. So I walked in and I said, I'm interested in the mail Jeep. And the lady was like, we got tons of them. If you go out to the back lot, you can talk to the people that are selling them. And I'm like, all right. I go back there. And there's like 100 of them, right? There's tons of them. And I'm thinking, oh, this is a much bigger deal than I originally thought. And I walked into the place and I said, I'm interested in a mail Jeep, but like, are they like horrible condition? Like, tell me about it. They're like, well, it only has one seat. It's only got a driver's seat. It's on the wrong side. And other than that, no, they haven't been driven much, right? Like they have maybe 30 or 40,000 miles on them.
And those are stop and go miles.
Yeah. We're not talking highway. And so I said, I'll take one. Like, give me one right now. And so
they're very good salespeople, apparently.
yeah. And so so I bought it and I brought it home to my parents, and my parents were a little bit concerned. They're like, why
They
do
wouldn't
we
be good
need
parents if they weren't.
why do we
Right.
need to keep this in our driveway? So then I said, hey, Dave, look at what I have found.
Yeah.
And so how did it go from your side?
Well, it was my first vehicle. So I didn't have my own car, and that was a good enough deal that my dad was like, all right.
Oh,
And
that's
then
funny.
I
didn't realize that.
I bought two of them, and I bought two of them, one for $450, one for $500, and I sold one of them for like $900 or I think we asked $1,000 and got $900. So mine was almost free.
That's brilliant.
Sold the one that wasn't as good, put it out by M59 and that. So
Yeah, I painted mine Viper blue.
See, that's the thing I remember about yours is that you got into the whole painting aspect of it.
Yeah,
And
and
it
that
was
didn't
like,
work out very well.
No,
but
because Viper Blue doesn't go good on a retired male Jeep. It doesn't have the effect that you would hope, like
No.
making it look cool.
no one
No.
thought it went faster.
including the Jeep itself.
Yeah.
And what's funny is I ended up selling mine to a male person for like $1,500.
Oh.
So I made money on that deal.
Nice.
Even after the Viper paint.
Even after I think that
you don't
was the
include
selling.
that. That was just regular maintenance.
I remember you were on the like high school basketball team for the church,
Yes.
right? And I don't know if I needed a ride home or what was going on.
No,
But-
I didn't have a car, so you always drove me.
Well, no, but you
Right?
had this Jeep.
Oh, I had the. Okay, so that
That was
after.
when you had the Jeep.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, there you go. Thanks for cranking that down. It was a cold night.
Mm-hmm.
You were driving the Jeep. I don't know if we were going to Ram's Horn or what, because that was something we
Usually,
would
yep.
do. But it wouldn't start.
Right. I never started because.
And so you had
Remember, this is the
for
better
s-
of the two
For
Jeeps.
some reason, I remember. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm getting this wrong. My memory says you had nail clippers that you used to bridge
there were pliers
Were
or
they-
screwdrivers or whatever.
Some metal object.
some metal object
Yeah.
to bridge the charge between like the solenoid
Yep.
and something
starter.
else so that
Good memory.
it would start.
Yeah.
But in my mind, it was nail clippers. I don't know why, because you were like searching frantically.
It could've.
Oh, it's
Well, then
okay.
it
I'll
could've
do. And you're like looking in your car for stuff, and I'm like, what is going on here? Like,
Yeah.
Who lives this way?
I know. It's probably a $12 solenoid. Never replaced it. Started it with pliers for as soon as it went bad until the Jeep stopped going.
Yeah, and you tried to get it to stop going as much as you possibly could.
Did you guys?
Yeah.
Didn't you guys? Those were only 2-wheel drive Jeeps as well, right?
Rear wheel drive, yeah.
Real wheel drive, but you wanted to treat them as if they were like legit, like
4-wheel
Jeeps.
drive.
So you
yeah.
took them behind the church. Didn't you guys get those stuck behind the
Yes,
church a couple
we got
times?
one of them hard stuck.
Yeah.
And who was it? Someone had to pull us out of a swamp.
Somebody with a big 4-wheel drive. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't.
I think
remember
I was
who.
there
Yeah.
when that happened,
It
and
made
I
a
remember
big-
it was a
there
little
was
bit.
a lot of
it was-
people
it
who
was
went.
Bill
out
Wells.
It was
to see
during. It was after church or something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
Bill
like
Wells.
we were all out there watching you guys, thinking, why?
Well, we
the
It
answer
was
is
a
why
big
not?
mud bog.
Yeah,
Like,
I loaded
why
a couple
not?
people in, and I was just like showing off because I had sort of muddy tires and it had positive traction, and
Yeah.
so we just went bombing into the back field,
Yeah.
having a great time. But I'd never driven back there.
Yeah.
Admittedly, we didn't know there was a swamp.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we drove it into the swamp because I didn't know there was a swamp there, so we just drove straight into a swamp, and it was like,
So awesome.
and then. Yeah, we got it out though.
This is like an
eventually.
episode of life, right? Like there are like in life, you look back and there's like little periods, little episodes in life, and this is an episode I remember with you too. Was the Jeeps? It's like it could be its own TV show, you know. Steve finds Jeep, shares with friend.
Friend rolls Jeep.
Friend sticks Jeep in mud.
Yeah, I flipped it too when I was out there.
Did you really?
Yeah, I flipped it upside down. So,
And you know what he did?
No,
He rolled it back over and
rolled
kept
it back
going.
over and drove home. The
that's a testament to the Jeeps.
Tell the
If nothing else. I mean,
you gotta be going pretty fast if you're gonna put a box on its roof.
yeah.
Because it
Depends on how heavy the roof
It's a
is.
square.
So how did that happen?
I just took it out in the field and I was doing donuts in a dry field, and then I fell into a hole,
Yep.
and then it tripped it up. But we all know each other from Impact, so we all went to the same church, and that was our connection.
Yep.
And from my perspective, there was like the Impact royalty, like it was you and Paul Cronowet and Donovan Jock and Rich Trahey. And then there was me. I was never in the same class as you guys.
That's so funny
What is?
that you see it that way.
Well, because we had the same leaders. Like Steve was still the same leader.
Yeah.
And so he would tell us, there was stories that were passed down about you guys. And then Steve was a couple years older in school than I was. And so he was sort of the bridge. Like he shared some class with you guys, but you had graduated. So when I came in, I became friends with Steve, and Steve was that bridge between us. And I think that's pretty cool. We wanted to get Steve Adrianson to come over here too.
Oh yeah, you
That
should
would be-
sometime.
that
I'm
would
sure
be
you will
awesome.
if you guys can make it work schedule wise someday.
That's
Yeah.
the
That's the
trick.
hope.
And but that would be awesome. But I was gonna say of the other group that was that I mentioned before that came before me, you were the one that really sort of took it on yourself and the initiative to reach in and hang out with people you didn't even necessarily were in high school with. I mean, you see us as not so separate in age, but at that time,
Yeah, at the time,
it almost feels
when
like a
you're
generation.
Younger, 3 or 4 years is a big difference, right?
Yeah, when you're 15 and you don't have a driver's license, or you're 16, you just got your driver's license, and you're in 10th or 11th grade, and then you've got the guy who already moved out of his parents' house, has his own apartment, and is doing his own thing. It's like you're in my parents' generation, but you're fun and cool. So
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, those times it was fun. The truth of that story too is a little bit like, I think this is just a thing that is real. When you're in a high school youth group like that, and even though you're part of the broader church, your identity is really as part of that group.
yeah,
When you leave past that and you're not actually plugged in to the adult portion of the church, it's hard to let go of that experience of being part of something that's so, I don't know, it's kind of all encompassing when you're in high school and you're part of a youth group like that. Like that's like the big part of your life. You've got school and you've got youth group and then your friends in that, and that's everything. So, I left high school and there was nothing on the other side of that could compare to the experience I had. So a little bit of your experience of me wasn't just like, I was like some great guy who was like selflessly reaching back to the younger generations to
like, I still want to play.
There was a person of me that was like, oh man, the other side of this really is not that fun.
Yeah.
And man, if I can kind of go back a little bit, not like wanting to regress myself, but kind of plug back into that, then I can keep that kind of taste of life.
Yeah.
So there was a little bit of that going on too, for sure. I wasn't as mature as maybe you saw me.
Though, when I was a freshman in high school at Lakeland, you were, I believe, probably a junior.
I graduated in 94, so if you were 96.
You were not, so you were a senior.
Okay.
So you were a senior. I'm a freshman. And to this day, I'm a teacher, so I walk the halls of schools to this day. But to this day, I remember something that you did every time I passed you in the hall. And every time I passed you in the hall, you had a smile ear to ear, and you would say, "Hey, Steve," and like you just were excited. And Lakeland, I mean, that was kind of a dark and kind of
it was an armpit.
It was a tough place to go to high school.
It did seem like under Milford in quality. For some reason.
It's changed. The aesthetic of the building has changed a little bit recently, but in that day, it looked like a prison.
Yeah,
it straight up looked like a prison. There were like straight gray beige walls on the outside with like slits for windows, and that was it.
Oh wow!
And then the doors were like those steel, like heavy duty entry doors that that looked formidable. That was how Lakeland looked. So, and it had a little bit of that feeling inside, like you're in.
Did Milford have that too?
You were doing time.
Milford was a warm carpet.
Yeah,
you know, like it was a like totally different
fresh
feel.
Baked goods that they pass out.
Exactly. But I remember thinking as I'm walking through the halls, everyone's kind of got their heads down. There's nobody's happy, and then here's Jon Hart. I can see him down the hall. Hey, Steve. Hey, you know, and you're interacting, and to this day, I remember the moment I'd pass you, I'd be like, everything's better now. Aww. Right? Like, and so now as a teacher, when I'm walking down the hall, I'm emulating you.
Oh,
so yeah, it definitely changed me.
That's really, thank you for sharing that. I did not know that. I would say, you know, going back to that idea of we were in this kind of insular youth group where we really had such an experience there that there was nothing outside of it that compared. I had such tremendous affection for people who shared that experience. I mean, tremendous affection, everybody. And I was like, I felt like it was so good to be a part of a church youth group that there was so much like truth being learned, and like, you know, we were going on mission trips and we were serving, and the church really kind of saw us. Like the church kind of upheld the youth group too really well. That I just felt like it was such good. I was always so sad if somebody didn't have that experience. Like if somebody like came in and for some reason became disenfranchised, maybe it was their own doing, maybe it was something that just happened, you know. But if somebody came and then left, I was always like, oh man, I feel so bad for them. Like, it's so good. So if I saw somebody from my church in school, it was like, hey, you know, it was the best. My people. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, you guys did something right, because when I was there for the first time, when I first got into Grace, we've shared this story before, but he made a big spectacle coming in. And so initially I thought, wow, that guy's got balls.
There's freedom here.
How does this? I mean, I'm
that's Christian freedom right there.
Yeah, I'm
bomb a window.
I'm pretty. You heard the show.
I did. I did hear that part.
But I remember being just really self-conscious because all of the peers that I had prior to that, everything was about being cool. Church was not cool. We were there because our parents forced us, that kind of thing. That was my mentality. So then coming into the thing, I see him. I'm like, wow, this guy really doesn't care what people think of him. And then he came straight over to me as soon as the class was over, introduced himself, and like made a point to reach out to me because he recognized me as new. Me, desperate for friends, was like, did we just become best friends? Because I'm not going to let you go. So then he and I became friends. And it didn't take very long when Steve would say to me when we were at church, okay, here's what we do. Scan the room. Is anybody here new? And if anybody here's new, that's who we go and talk to as soon as class is over. Like, he spelled it out for me, what he did as an intentional act. And it was like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes perfect sense because that's what I got. Yep. So then we would do that. And it's like, I'm sure Steve got it from somewhere because I know Rich would do the same thing. And it's like, whoever came before us passed on this, and then we, you know, is actually articulated. Now that I think about it, I don't know that I ever passed it on, but I know that while I was there, that's what I always did too, because it was like, these are what we do as the.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's things like that are taught, but they're also caught, right? So, like you said, you're doing this thing in your high school hallways. I didn't like explicitly say, this is how you do it.
Yeah.
You just picked up on that, you know? So even if you didn't like explicitly tell somebody this is what you do, being impacted by somebody who sees you when you feel like as an outcast and somebody comes and pulls you in, like you never forget that. And, I think most people think later at some point, if that felt good for me, man, that probably would feel really good for others. I should try.
Yeah, it was nice to have it explicitly told because sometimes I could just
because we're knuckleheads too. That's the other side.
I accept good feeling gifts, and I'm like, yes, I got something.
Amen to that.
Sometimes I don't make that correlation, but it was
Hilarious.
like, hey, this is what we do, and so I saw it as, oh, I have a job. Like
That's cool.
It gave me sort of also some purpose, so it really felt great. But that definitely was something that was fostered. We really had a great group, and I feel bad for anybody who doesn't have that experience.
Well, I'll tell you, anything you look at where things are going right, you really always can kind of look straight up at where the leadership is. You really can.
Yeah.
And, it's rare that you will find a culture of like good behavior and like self-sacrifice and people looking for mutual benefit. And then find that the leader is like self-centered or, kind of egotistical or something. So, you guys wanting to bring Steve Adrianson in to talk, I totally understand. My first day at Grace Church was Steve Adrianson's first day
Really?
at Grace Church.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I rode my bike up. I was living in an apartment at the time with my dad on M59. And my sister had started a Bible study in our house before we moved out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that were coming to it were like Donovan, Jennifer Cool, Fritz Cromp, you may remember that name.
Yeah. Royalty from my early days.
Yeah. Well, for me too, right? And so like there was this group of people that would come to our house and we'd have these Bible studies. And so I was going to a Presbyterian church at the time, but this Bible study was like my first introduction to like non-denominational Christians who are just looking in the Word, right? And not having it filtered to them through stories that a priest or pastor might say. So it was just like really cool to meet people who did this, like actually read the Word together and talked about it. And then I was like, these people all go to Grace Church. And so one day I just decided to ride my bike up there, and we were reading a book, like Answering the Tough Ones.
Okay.
I think is what it was called.
Okay.
And we were at a picnic table out in the grass, right where the driveway that leads up opens up into the parking lot.
Yeah.
There was a picnic table over there, and we were out there just reading. And Steve Aders, I remember seeing him walk out. He's got the leg that is doesn't work because of the sickness he had as a child, and so here he is, kind of limping out. And I had no idea who he was, but I just remember thinking after talking to him briefly, I really like him, And honestly, I went through a lot of turmoil in high school. Parents divorced, all kinds of crazy stuff happened. He was such a good example of Christian love to me. It was so attractive, and that was why I had so much joy.
Yeah.
Is because I saw him pour into others, and I saw how it like people's eyes were open, people were like excited to be there, and I loved being part of it.